Welcome and thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. In this show, we cover a broad range of topics that cater to both CRE newcomers and industry leaders alike. I'm your host, Shanti Ryle, Director of Content Marketing here at Crexi, and today we are so excited to sit down with Heather Ewing, founder of ABSTRACT Commercial Real Estate. Before we dive in, a little bit about our guest. Heather Ewing is a nationally recognized commercial real estate expert and the founder of ABSTRACT Commercial Real Estate, specializing in retail and restaurant brokerage and mixed-use developments in Madison, Wisconsin. Known as the Queen of Downtown Madison, Heather blends over 40 years of local insight with a bold national perspective to serve landlords, developers, tenants, and investors with precision. She proactively secures off-market pocket listings for developers and investors, pairing strategic deal-making with an art-forward marketing approach to maximize visibility and close complex transactions. She has served as the 2025 First Regional Vice President for Region 7 in CCIM, the 2024 President for the CCIM Wisconsin chapter, where she earned the 2024 President's Cup Tier 3 First Place Prize. Very impressive. The 2024 President of Commercial Brokers Group, and from 2018 to present, she's been a member of the City of Madison BID Board. Heather is the founder and host of Heather Ewing, the CRE Run, capital R-U-N, Rundown podcast, because she's a runner. I see the pun there. And founder of the annual Bright Lights Run Walk to benefit girls on the run. She's been featured by iHeartRadio, CARW, DMI, NIOP, Channel 3000, Midwest Real Estate Journals, and others as a sought-after national speaker on commercial real estate and mindset. An international marathoner, told you she was a runner. Heather has raced in Berlin, London, Paris, Milan, New York, Boston, and many more, bringing the same discipline, endurance, and drive to every deal and audience. Heather, what a resume. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Shanti. It's a true joy to be here. Thank you for having me.
We are so excited to have you here. We've got a lot to talk about on the docket. But to kick us off, I know I just covered your background and your experience, your many accolades, but I'd love to hear in your own words how you got started in commercial real estate.
Definitely. I've always said people either take a straight route in life or they take the weaving, and I was definitely the latter. I started originally with 2 business degrees in operations management. I worked in that arena for 11 years, which was capacity planning, overseas tooling, negotiation. It was all electronics, believe it or not. So I spent 11 years in that arena, and then I had a life transforming car accident. And at a young age, that really started me thinking of the big questions in life that people typically encounter at midlife of who am I, what am I, what's my purpose. So all these different deep questions really started culminating. And from that, I tried different careers, from fitness, where I obtained certifications in that, from coaching, an art studio. So really, I kind of did a full gamut on that. And then one day, a boyfriend, one of his friends, was like, "Oh, you should consider commercial real estate." And it had never crossed my mind. And those were the very beginnings of my career into commercial real estate. And it was just talking with different firms, of understanding what they offer, how they work, and that really kicked it off.
Yeah. What hooked you, you think? You tried all this different serving platter of professions. What was it about commercial real estate that stuck for you?
Right. It was a beautiful blending of both numbers, but then also the art. And so for me, I really love that because you're grounded in the tangible numbers. And I think there's always something really nice about the black and white of numbers. And then with the brick and mortar, these beautiful big developments or some of the different properties, I do a lot of work in our downtown. So it's, if you want to say, a little more creative, of a lot of different older properties, just peculiarities that I really enjoy. So it was the merging of those two, and it was really relationship focused. And that was something that really spoke to me. And with that, it was nice to have the underpinnings, but then also be able to utilize those long-term relationships to really help people grow and obtain the returns that they're looking for.
Absolutely. So let's see. When was it that you started in commercial real estate? How far along were you in your career?
Sure. So I was actually 40 when I got into
Wow.
commercial 11
Yeah.
years ago, which seems unreal. It's amazing how time flies. But
Yeah.
actually, backing up, I did when I had my art studio. I worked part-time at First Weber in downtown Madison. And believe it or not, it was as a simple admin. And the reason I did that was while my business was growing. I've been a firm believer that you need a clear strategy for different things. And so sometimes you're willing to take a step back to get forward. And that was really um, seeing some of the different things that made me very clear that I did want commercial, but a great group and kind of an impetus there as well of the arena.
Yeah. Yeah. The reason I ask is because, the first, as any commercial agent will tell you, the first few years of business are brutal. You start with no contacts, zero in the book of
Right.
business, and you have to build it all from scratch again, which
Hmm.
can be really hard, especially for someone who's had a career before then.
Right.
So, you know, going back 11 years ago to that starting point, how did you approach building connections? How did you approach building credibility? And can you share any of the tougher moments along the way in the early days of your commercial real estate path?
Certainly. So with it, entering without a book of business is very daunting, right? At the same time, when you take a look back, I had excelled in sports. I had two business degrees. I had always delivered on any arena that I was in. So in that sense, I had a good track record. And also, I was funding my own journey. It wasn't someone else. The broker was a small boutique retail shop, and I 100% funded my own. It was my own money. It wasn't from outside sources. So with that, I had a lot on the line and also just a lot of drive. And when I make decisions at 200% because you can't make one and then play on both sides, right? So I think that was one, something that's very important for people to learn is to make very clear decisions. Two, I would say it was something I would have changed and something I recommend to everyone that's newer is to get a coach.
Hmm.
Well, definitely. I had mentorship, but also coaching is a whole nother facet. And also you pick up different things from each and every person you learn from. So I highly recommend people to get coaches because when I look back, I could have learned those lessons, but with a much, much quicker return, if you want to say, and it wouldn't have hit financially as hard.
Sure, sure. Invest in improving yourself as much as you can, which, might be there's a little bit more of a cost barrier for younger brokers, say just coming out of college, but there
Right.
are so many good resources out there for folks who want to better not only their commercial real estate skills, but just their business skills, their personal growth development, things along those
Definitely.
lines. Yeah, so definitely agree with that. Um, what do you think were, you mentioned committing 200%, you mentioned making clear decisions. What do you think about your personality in particular was most crucial to building up career success in your early days and today, if you want to take
Right.
the red thread across?
I would definitely say resourcefulness and also being comfortable in the uncomfortable. Those are two things that anyone really needs to be able to adapt to quickly if it's not already a skill set. And I would say both of those, it came through life experience of trying different things, the way I grew up. And I also think that you have to hang your own hat on your own skills. You can learn from other people, but you have to be confident in what you do. And I think as if someone's a new broker, that's where they do kind of have to hang the confidence on the firm, if you want to say. But also of stepping up quickly and learning the market. That was always something that really was helpful for me. I had lived and I grew up in the area. So knowing Madison was very helpful over the various decades. But then I also was boots on the ground, or as I say, tennies on the ground of talking with different tenants, talking with different landlords, going to a lot of networking. So I think it's really securing your success by doing the fundamental, what many people see as boring. I
Mhm.
kept that consistent. And I think that's always been a virtue too.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just as a quick sidebar, tennies with tenants would be an amazing, like, word on the street type of series.
Right.
So I just wanted to bookmark that because I think
I
that's
like it.
great.
Noted. Mhm.
Um, so going back to the relationship side of the business, it's all about who you know. You got to know your market, know your stuff, but it is a relationship driven business. So, what do you think has been either, from an innate personality perspective for you, or a skill that you've had to learn to help get people from point A to point B to help build that trust during a deal process from your point of view?
Right. Something that's been really helpful with the relationships is doing all the groundwork. I call myself a recovering perfectionist. And right, there's upsides and downsides to every character trait, but I really like to be prepared going into my meetings, also understanding the area. Uh, I've also lived and worked and played, if you want to say, in downtown Madison for the past 11 years out of the, plus 40 that I've lived in the area. So I understand the market in a different way than other people. And I think with those relationships, it was really listening to them.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of times people, especially in sales, will come in with an agenda and then they just puke it all on you. And people don't find that
Not so
interesting,
pleasant.
believe it or not, right?
Yeah.
So I think listening to people, also really wanting to deliver for them and putting everything I have into different projects and deals, that I think that foster the relationships. And I also believe that having direct conversations, being able to tactfully and respectfully say the hard things is really important for long-term relationships and just the industry that we work in. You have to find a comfort level with challenging
Mhm.
conversations.
Sure. Yeah, I think having a good moral compass or as much as possible doing the right thing can lead to sometimes having those like, maybe this isn't gonna work or blah blah blah, but
No,
the mindset is always doing the right thing by your client, letting
definitely.
that carry you through and giving you the courage they need to have those conversations. So that makes sense.
Exactly. Right. Because
Yeah.
in some deals, you might be going through due diligence, and as the time goes, maybe it just really isn't a good fit. And that's where
Mm.
I feel too that we have the fiduciary duty as brokers to share, this is a concern for me, this, or that. And of course, at the end of the day, it's up to your client to decide what's right for them and their business and their risk tolerance and the return anticipated. But we're really there to point out things that only we can see due to our market knowledge and our experience, that it's just not their niche. So
Hmm.
we need to step up in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, from a prospecting perspective,
Mhm.
in those early days, building up your connections, how did you go about staying top of mind for clients, without being, overly calling, without being pushy? How did you think about just staying, in the back of their mind should the need arise?
Right. I think a varied approach is really important, whether it's phone calls, emails, providing information that would be of interest. Maybe one of their children is in a sport and you saw something about it, right? A team that's coming to town. I think it's also sharing little videos. Hey, I was out on a run. I know you were talking about this area. Wanted to share this with you. I think anytime you're providing value instead of touch and base, that it's going to be
Yeah.
well received. And also when you see you're not trying to just sell them, because I think there is genuine care where you get to know people for years and work with them. But in the beginning, I think it really is of just wanting to provide value, showing that you are different, so it's not the typical salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that networking is important, being on different panels, speaking opportunities, being interviewed by local press or other things, that all of that comes together. And the nice thing is too, you're not, look what I did. It's providing value on whatever topic you were speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
So a
Yep.
varied approach.
Yeah, it's all marketing at the end of the day.
Yes.
Absolutely. And, I want to touch on too, in our prep call for this conversation, you and I chatted a little bit about, you know, specifically the advantages that being a woman in this industry
Mhm.
has in terms of relationship building, in
Right.
terms of, coming up with creative solutions. I'd love to hear your perspective on that for our
Definitely.
audience.
Definitely. So it's not something that you hear of typically, right? So in that sense, what I have felt is really helpful is that being a woman at the negotiation table, I think when it's not two men, I think there's more of a relaxed energy,
Hmm.
right? Because it's not like two power forces coming at each other, right? Of who's top
Yeah.
dog. But I think it allows for more conversation, and I think also there's more listening involved.
Hmm.
And in my experience, I think it's a little bit more collaborative when you have two of the opposite sex. And is it always that way? No, because some women are more dominant than the man, and in some, the woman is much less dominant than the man. So it really depends. But I think having those open conversations and really focusing on what's the goal? Where's the end line? And how do we put together the best deal for everyone involved? Because you know how it is. There might be a short-term sale, right? But a lot of times someone's coming back to buy and invest further in a market or to have another lease or something of that nature. So I think it's a level of respect and care. And I think it's just, we all come from different backgrounds as people in general, but then I think also mixing up the sexes, you also have different backgrounds in that sense and experiences. So I think it just adds for a more varied approach and also something a little bit more unique.
Yeah, and I like what you said about somebody might be coming back to the market at any point, and there's the goal of the specific deal, but then there's the longer term goal of the good relationship through multiple deals, right?
Right.
And it's sometimes can be tricky to hold all those things as true simultaneously, but I do think women have a aptitude for it.
I would agree.
Multitasking, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
Exactly.
but yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I want to switch gears a little bit here to get into the nuts and bolts of your city, the Queen of Madison, specifically with retail and restaurants, which is what you focus on. So, in the world of retail, restaurant leasing, first of all, what makes this asset class so compelling to you, and why leasing versus sales?
Right. The reason I really was drawn to retail restaurants was that I've always loved shopping and I've always loved eating. I was like, it just lines up
Easy.
really easy, no brainer on that.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
remember thinking of like, God, why didn't I know about this 20 years ago when I started in the workforce, or even
Hmm.
before for
Hmm.
college? But I really enjoy it because it's a more artful asset class than industrial, than office. And with it, I think you just have more creatives, which I am a very creative person. So in that sense, you sense a synergy. And I think with it, especially post 2020, right? We hate to say the COVID word,
Hmm.
but I think that's where I realized in my hunch was that people are really going to want to get out and experience. Like get in the beginning, it's nice to have a little time away, a fewer events to attend, things of that nature. But we're humans. We're meant to enjoy time together to connect and create memories. And so I think that's a really neat way to create color in someone's life and to just really allow them to have those really special memories and also enrich our community. And
Yeah.
with my roots in Madison, that's a really important part.
Yeah, absolutely. We had Jay Lux, who is a huge leasing broker, more on the luxury side of LA's retail market. And he was talking about, I just really care about these streets. I care about what's in my city and getting to play a role in what the block looks like, what a person's experience when they're
Definitely.
walking down the street is just so satisfying and fulfilling. And I'm
It
like,
is
yep,
because
I,
again,
I
it's
can get
very
that.
artful, but you're impacting people's lives
Hmm.
financially, emotionally, and otherwise. And that's also
Hmm.
why I serve on so many boards because it's to create an impact in those sectors as well. But
Hmm.
jumping back to your question about triple net leasing and sales, it's one of those, they're both artful in their own way. And it's also nice from a deal flow and a structure because some of these triple net leases, they can take over a year, right? Or maybe a few months. So it all depends on if you're rezoning, if it's part of a new mixed use development, all of these different factors. And with a sale, it's also nice because you come in and you have some of those similar factors, but it's also a different experience. So anytime you have different time horizons, you can have similar time spent of due diligence, but yet they vary in that respect too. So I like them
Hmm.
both because it adds variety and it's still within my wheelhouse of the retail restaurants in the mixed use development.
Totally. Absolutely. So, in the retail, restaurant, mixed use space, when you are working with landlords, what is the most common misunderstanding or just misalignment that you encounter, and how do you communicate, the lingo between landlords and tenants, trying to ease up that communication?
I think it really varies by landlord. Kind of a
Mm.
general one though is just wanting to make sure that they get a good tenant. They're not going to spend time to bring someone in, pay out a TI, and then all of a sudden they have a vacant space again. So I think it's
Mhm.
really depending on the broker to weed out people that don't have the longevity to really
Mm.
understand the financials, to run those, to compare it and do their due diligence in tandem with the landlord. And I think too, some landlords are more focused on the return and others are really more focused on wanting to, if you want to say, enrich the community and creating more of
Mm.
a synergy and also seeing the longer play of the more people that are coming, the longer that they're staying and visiting or shopping and eating, that typically that's going to increase their return also. So I think it's
Mhm.
finding ways to further add value. And then of course, when you end up with the smaller landlords, I mean, you see some, it's sad because you see how much money has been left on the table for years or
Oh,
decades
yeah.
because people tend to hold inventory for a long time in this market because it's really good returns and it's stable. And even through challenging markets, um, people are still paying typically. So
Sure.
it really varies by the size of the landlord and also what they're really focusing on.
Yeah. And then on the other side, any key differences you've seen between national tenants versus more on the local scene in those conversations?
Yeah. Nationals are easier in the sense of their numbers. They understand how to go through some of these different processes and also they can look at a spot and it's a yes or no typically
Hmm.
fairly quickly. With the local, it all depends. Some are a little more savvy than others, and it might go quickly or it might take a long time. I think the challenge really is for both entities of getting through some of the construction, permitting, things of that nature, because that can be really
Mm.
challenging from a time fence. So if it's a large national too, you might have a lot of layers that you have to go through to get approvals, and sometimes it's not communicated. But
Sure.
pluses and minuses on both.
And a mom and pop can usually be like, "Yes, I'll just sign. Let's go."
They've
Well,
got good
hopefully not that
financials.
fast.
It could be
Please read the
easy.
lease agreement first before you sign. But
Right. Right. Have your attorney review it.
yes, yes, please get an attorney involved.
And
um,
please make it a commercial attorney,
yeah,
right? My
yes,
cousin, my neighbor, it's like, no, no.
yep.
The analogy I always use is You can go to a doctor, but if you're having problems with your eyes, would you want a podiatrist helping you? They're both doctors. So,
Yeah, that's a great way to explain it for sure.
right.
Um, and then, I'd love to get from your perspective, been in this market for 40 years, what trends are you seeing really shape the retail leasing scene in Madison? I know on our prep call we talked about how it's a university town, it's
Mhm.
mid-sized, but I'd love to get your 30,000-foot overview of the market and maybe, from that, how it compares to other mid-sized markets in the United States and why people should be looking at it.
I would say there's been a push towards having more of the national tenants for the security.
Hmm.
And I think it's easier to tie up a longer term lease. Here in Madison, though, in the downtown, there's a lot of, minimum of a 5 year or 10-year deal when you're working with a lot of tenants regardless. But I would say it's the nationals. You always see them cluster for any type of new thing. For example, last summer it was car washes. And so
Mm.
you see four different car washes coming in, or different. One year it was a rolled ice cream. Then everyone started coming in for that. I think with the downtown, due to the metrics, the 3+ million pedestrians annually, we're really getting a lot of the different national uh, eyes on Madison. Additionally, with building out the high rises, so Core
Mm.
Spaces has been doing a lot, and then of course there's others in the market. And I think as you expand that out, it's Madison has really good numbers when you compare it. The Sun Belt has been doing well for quite a while, but that's where you'll see also in the Midwest that that's starting to increase. Multifamilies taking a hit in different markets. Madison has just been strong, and we tend to
Mm.
stay strong, like I said, through some of those different challenges. So I think that's been a big point of interest also,
Sure.
longevity.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, it's a strong market. It's getting more and more national tenant attention. Walk us through, as you're dealing with a client coming into Madison, how do you think about matching that tenant to which neighborhood? Like, how do you think from more of that creative perspective when you're finding a space for them or they have a new concept? How do you think about selling them or fitting them into the community that you help shape?
Definitely. So it's a two-layered process in the sense of knowing the area really well, and I run thousands of miles every year. And so I think you also take a lot in by foot. But what I like to do is
Mm.
take what I know from my living experience, but then I like to combine that also with the data, right? So
Mm.
that's where pulling different reports, pulling the demographics, all of that information. I think when you intertwine both, you have a really compelling story. And with that, it's having those clear conversations of what they need if they're not sure of certain things, identifying that early on and adjusting. And it's having that good rapport and communication where if something might be lining up from a demographic standpoint, psychographic, that maybe it's missing on something else or vice versa, right? That's something
Mm.
they just hadn't been able to audibly share that is important.
Sure. Yeah, and you mentioned data. So how do you go about gathering your data sources? I do love that you're on foot running thousands of miles through the city. I cannot overstate how important it is for brokers to go look at the properties. But, outside of physically seeing it, are you using any certain tools or are you thinking about data in an interesting way? How do you put together the numbers component of your market knowledge for your clients?
Definitely. Well, it's easy to pull it one through Crexi, right? Different demographics. Additionally, I'm a CCIM, so then I'll use Site to do business for different things. But I think it's really nice to understand where is the market? What are the vacancies? What's the occupancy? how long are listings on the market? Where are they
Mm.
at? What's the effective rents? If you're looking at leases or things like that. Also, the history of sales, and then that's also where I have other databases as well. But the nice thing with Crexi is that one stop for a lot of the main components of it, and then I like to filter in different aspects of it. So I think when you pull all of that, right, between my over 40 years in the market
Mhm.
of running through the streets, of pulling the Crexi data, other augmenting it with things, that you get a really nice layered picture. And I think
Mm.
it's really providing that value that clients deserve. And
Mm.
I think if people aren't providing that level of support, I don't think you're not quite crossing that finish line in my book.
Sure. I love that. That clients deserve. Excellent way of putting it.
Right. Because if you
And
think about it, what we share informs their decision. And if you're missing a segment of data, they're not going to have that to make their informed choice.
mm, yeah, it's that fiduciary duty again to give them the best advice, which means you got to know what the best advice is and know your
Right.
numbers. No,
Right.
absolutely. And then, kind of based on that data, do you have any interesting success stories where you've given like certain information to clients and they maybe made one choice or another, or any wins that you can think of, kind of combining those two buckets of information to successfully deliver on a deal for a client?
Absolutely. I have
Yeah.
a client currently, they're out of state. They're looking to invest. It's a new concept, so I end up with a lot of newer concepts, which is kind of fun as well. And
Cool.
so, right, so through pulling that data, what I was able to share with them was that they thought they wanted to be in the downtown in specific areas. And so through the data, through my other insights, in combining both of those, it did prove out that they were in the right spot, that they weren't too far out,
Mm.
because you know how it is, a block or two does matter in retail and
Especially
different
for
things.
walking. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And so to me, it just always feels good when you know that you've delivered 200%, and they were really happy. So of course I was happy. So that's a
Yay.
recent one.
I
Exactly.
gotta know, what was the concept and what are some of the more interesting concepts that you've come across in the last couple of years that want to come in?
Yeah, this one I'm not able to share. Unfortunately, it's confidential right
We'll
now.
come back to you in like
I'll
6
come
months or
back and
so.
I'll
Yeah.
share that one. Right. But I brokered, it was neat. It was an e-gaming, and
Oh,
there,
like a internet cafe
yes, but
situation?
this is really, it's a beautiful build out,
Mm.
and it's cafe doesn't do it justice in this sense. They have the large screens, they have over 100 computers.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
right, so it's neat. It's three graduates from UW-Madison.
Uh-huh.
And the nice thing is it'll have a small bar, small eats, but it's really going to have some of those different large gaming from other
Mm.
countries, from our country, and
Mm.
it'll be a really nice way to connect that all in. Lovely build out, and it'll be top notch. So I'm excited
Mm.
about that. Also, I just brokered another recent new concept of saunas and cold plunges. So what's
Oh, oh.
interesting, yes. So what's
Mm-hmm.
interesting is, I know I have to try it out. I've never cold plunged yet.
I love sauna. I do like 50 seconds of a cold shower sometimes, and that's my limit. Cold plunges are terrifying.
I hear you. I know I said I would. So that's why later this year I will. I should have video of that.
Keep me
But
posted.
anyways, yeah. But the neat thing is they've traveled all over the world. So
Mm.
Europe, these different countries, just how they really embrace the holistic part of it, and how they have the large baths and things of that nature, where
Mhm.
it's really a community gathering space. So it's one of those, it is larger. They also have personalized ones for parties, and it's really, it's been altered so that it fits for America, but
Hmm.
that's where we've never had anything of that size here. So going
Yeah.
through DSPS, just even finding people that make pools that large for commercial use, interior
Yeah.
lifeguard, all these different little facets you would never think you have to go through for a new concept, but those are some of those things you encounter when things are done for the first time in an area.
I gotta ask, how do you build comps for that? How do
Well,
you build out comps for that?
yeah, no,
Going
so
into
it's one of
ideas.
those, they talked with different operators of,
Mm,
what type of demographics work, psychographics, so you can align that, but there's
mm,
certain segments that, I think it's really they utilized my understanding of the area and also habits and how people see things and how they're portrayed in different neighborhoods. So
mhm.
there was, again, it's kind of that multi-level approach.
Sure.
And I'm really excited for them to open later this year.
Yeah, I'll have to come visit. I
Yes,
do want to
please
wrap up
do.
this section with what neighborhood are you most excited about for upcoming
I love
projects in?
downtown. It's downtown is, I don't know, for again the number of miles and races that I ran in downtown Madison, it's I just love checking in on my current clients, earlier
Mm,
clients, just providing information for other people or maybe an investor that's thinking about Madison or someone that I've been connecting with on LinkedIn. It's just
mm,
really fun to share about an area that I love, that's thriving, that continues to grow, and just has so much to offer on so many different levels.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
your hometown hero.
I love it.
And and then just to close Madison with a nice little bow, what is the biggest piece of advice you would give to either maybe a new broker coming in to this market and wanting to help build the community the way you do, or an investor concept coming
Mhm.
into Madison that maybe people would be surprised by?
Definitely. I would say really understand which niche you want to go into if you want to get into brokerage, right? Which niche, because it's a competitive arena. Anywhere is competitive with commercial real estate. So I don't think you can really be a generalist and succeed in the
Mm,
same way that you can by niching because all of your time is spent in that sector. So you know all the different deals, all the players. You've probably been in a lot of the basements or all
sure.
these different spaces over the time. So it's really important to have that knowledge. And I would say as far as investors, again, working with someone that is in the niche because otherwise they're going to know some of the information, but they're not going to know all the players. They're not going to have the history. They're not going to have the rapport. And that's been really helpful for me in getting my clients the deal. Certain lots are not for sale, and due to the relationships, they become for sale, and then you get the lot. So
Mm,
it's things like that do matter.
yeah.
And again, why work with someone that has 70% of the expertise when you can work with someone that has it all?
It's a
Again,
great
why short
point.
yourself when there's no need for it?
It's a great point. It's a great point.
Hmm.
Just go deep. I love it.
Right. Right.
Well, Heather, I want to close up this really awesome conversation with a couple rapid fire questions, if you
Sure.
don't mind. So, to kick us off, I could probably guess, but if you had $50 million today and you had to spend it in commercial real estate today, where would you park that money and what kind of concept, maybe what neighborhood and why?
Definitely. So I would do a couple of different things. I would be interested in mixed use development in Madison, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of fun. I'm working on a project right now where I get to help with the exterior design even. So that's been very exciting.
Ooh,
But I
very
would,
cool.
yes. So investing in mixed use developments, but then also I would go overseas. I have an affinity for Europe. I love running marathons in Europe. So I would
Mm-hmm.
want to work with someone so I would know how to wisely invest in that
Sure.
market. But also giving back through UW Madison, we have been the number one real estate school in the country, which is amazing. I work with students quarterly. We have coffee and CRE, which is a really nice way that I give
Mm,
back. So I would want to
yeah.
give them some of the money so that they could learn it, of investing. And then, of course, within my own family, my nephew interns with me.
Love
And
that.
Yeah, I would love to get him investing and my little other nephew and goddaughter.
I love that. You're the first person on this show to say that they would give some of that money to a commercial real estate school.
It's
That's
so
very,
important, right? Because if you
yeah,
think about it, what a great way to give back to our community.
yeah. No, I 100% agree. And it's, I'm a big fan of Allison Weiss. I'll shout her out on the podcast, who
Yes,
has a CRE recruiting firm, and she
she's
talks a
great.
lot. Oh yeah, she's fabulous. But she
Yes.
talks about so much. There's this huge group of folks retiring soon in the industry, and we have to lift up the next generation of commercial real estate folks. And there's so much opportunity in
Right.
that position vacuum. So it's a really exciting time to get into the industry, especially.
Definitely. And I think too, don't you think it's our civic duty that as we do well to give back, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
only I think money's a great way, but also in that time of what we've learned, some of the hard hits, how you help people to prevent that or shorten the learning curve. I think all of those are kind of our
Mm.
human duties that I think you
Yeah.
should want to, but if you don't, like you just do it then.
It's paying the knowledge forward, making the next
Exactly.
generation better.
No one does it
Absolutely.
alone. And anyone that's been in commercial real estate knows it's a team sport. It is not
Hmm.
an individual.
And a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly.
So I get to running
Exactly.
again. Um, what is the craziest way that you found a new client or opportunity?
Well, I found them through run groups, which I found fascinating because I would never have thought.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. All different sorts of ways. The normal cold calling, canvassing, networking.
Hmm.
Um, you just run into people. I mean, I get requests for market updates on sometimes my like Saturday long runs, which is 12 miles.
Oh,
People see
wow.
it's like, oh, Heather, quick questions. Like, sure.
Do you do
So
like Instagram live streams and they'll just ask questions while you're running?
it was funny. Yeah, I stopped for water and it's like, oh, quick
Wow.
question.
That's so
So,
funny.
it's just fun, different little things like that where
Yeah.
you end up getting people through avenues you just hadn't thought. But
Yeah.
they recognize you they recognize you, from different forums and things of that nature. And
Hmm.
I share a lot of knowledge, so I think that's where too people recognize the industry and my name.
Absolutely. You gotta just put yourself out there, no matter
Exactly. And
what, right? And
that's a
then
thing
last,
too.
oh, go
We
ahead.
love talking with people, so it's pretty simple to get a conversation going.
Yes. Yes, that definitely helps. You gotta like talking to people in this
Right. And if
business.
not, you're in the wrong industry.
Yeah, yeah. You gotta be social.
Yes.
Um, and then finally, what do you think is the most common misconception about being a broker or in commercial real estate in general?
You hear frequently that you won't get a call back, and that it it's a busy arena. I think it does happen, but I think it's really, um, at least in Madison, I feel like we have a lot of really good brokers in
Hmm.
in the different arenas. I think it being a smaller town too, that you have to mind your P's and Q's a little bit more than a larger market,
Hmm.
right? But
Sure.
yeah, I think it's just really finding the right fit, both from a niche and also personality. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes people don't factor that in.
Yeah.
Personalities matter.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's where a coach comes in, right? You can get
That
that
too.
feedback on figuring out what your quirks are and where their strengths and where their maybe weaknesses and
Right.
figuring it all out.
And
I love
everyone
it.
has different communication styles, right? Some people love email, others, the next client, that's the last thing they want. So
Hmm.
it's being adaptable.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
love it. Heather, this has been so much fun. I am so
Thank
glad we
you
got
for
to do
having me,
this.
Shanti.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to connect? Emails, social media, where's best?
LinkedIn is perfect. I'm on there quite a bit. So it's
Mhm.
Heather Ewing. Ewing is spelled Ewing,
Mhm.
just like Dallas. Although some people are too young now, and I'm like, oh, it's
Yeah.
happening. But LinkedIn is great.
Mhm.
Feel free. Also, email is Heather at abstract-cre.com.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, thank you again so much. And thank you, everyone who tuned in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't miss the next one. Visit crexi.com/podcast and sign up to get the next episode delivered straight to your inbox. You can also subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app or check out our YouTube channel for video recordings of each and every episode. Take care and be sure to tune in next time.